spend some time talking about first an understanding of converged systems as it relates to you and your business, as it relates to the majority of you being IT leaders within the functions you're in, and to provide some examples of how we want to leverage that or think about that in terms of your ability to help your companies make change. And three basic things that I talk to a lot of people about in terms of making money, saving money, and gaining a competitive advantage. As I've spent much of my time in IT, I've consistently found that those three things are, whether we're anywhere in a company, is what we want to be contributing to. And oftentimes that gets missed in the world of IT, whereas we get so caught up in what I refer to as counterproductive cost centers. And we wrap ourselves around those counterproductive cost centers, whether it be our equipment, our application, our processes, and so on and so forth. And oftentimes what gets missed is how much money is what I'm doing actually helping the company achieve in terms of revenue? How much money am I actually helping the company save, not just in terms of the current equipment to be purchased, but more so if you think about it in terms of compliance, litigation, or in other terms that whether you're in the insurance industry, medical industry, or otherwise, or name your industry, those are key factors from a savings component that are critical into whether or not your business is going to be successful. And then lastly is that competitive advantage. Are you enabling your company to get to market in a time frame that allows your company to have a significant opportunity to move ahead of the other companies that are in your space? Are you allowing your company to leverage IT to actually take actions that will actually bring about new opportunities that you or your company hadn't previously thought about? So we're going to spend some time talking about that in context to what we refer to as converged systems. So as we get into that, I'm going to paint a picture of a little blue guy, not so happy IT guy, kind of sad, having a hard day. There's another ask, and we still have 3 weeks of asks already awaiting us, and there's some other not so smart non-IT person who knows exactly what IT is supposed to be doing, as those people are always making themselves available to us. And we always have to figure out how are we going to deal with these individuals and what that's going to look like. So for this IT professional, there's various existing problems. There can be many. And there's a few here. But as much as anything for those existing problems, there's the issues of trying to figure out how do I keep the lights on. And more often than not, keeping the lights on is the job of the day, every day. We come in, if the lights aren't on, i.e. if our basic operations aren't in a means of showing productivity, whereas at least some end user isn't complaining, then we're not able to really address the other things that are on the plate. And so we can sum those up in terms of the words here around the complexities associated with XYZ. We can talk about how we want to give administrators more flexibility or other components of IT that we're constantly dealing with. But the reality is the majority of the time is focused around keeping the lights on. And then after we've gotten the keeping the lights on, it's how to actually set up the infrastructure for whatever the next project is. And that next project can be many of any things, and more than likely, which we oftentimes get confused. And one piece that I didn't mention in my background, before I came to work for HP 17 years ago, my job was an IT administrator for Barksdale Air Force Base, a part of the United States Air Force, in our hospital there. And what I found there on a consistent basis, obviously with antiquated tools compared to what we have today, but what I found there on a very consistent basis was everything that I was doing, consistently, everything that I was doing was always being prepared for, or I should say was always falling behind because there was something else that I had to prepare for that was coming along. And as an IT administrator in that environment, I often found that whether it be the commander for the hospital or the dental lab or whoever, they were always a little bit ahead of me in terms of they knew what they wanted to do next to have more patients in, create more radiological components for x-rays and blah, blah, blah. But I wasn't in those discussions with them. And not only was I not in those discussions with them, I typically despised them when they made a decision to do something that negatively impacted how I was going to actually run that hospital from an IT perspective. And I would often not just despise them, but challenge them later on, well, it's going to take X, Y, Z long before we can do whatever it is that you want to do in the hospital because of your decisions didn't match to what I'm doing from an IT perspective. And in speaking with customers and partners and individuals on a daily basis, essentially, over the last several years, that hasn't really changed. There is a consistent means of discussion that's happening at some board level or at some executive level that later on gets translated to IT more often than not, and IT had nothing to do with the decision at the table. Am I off? How do we get to change that? And that's where the entire realm of what we refer to as converged systems comes in. As to how do we now make sure that, as I mentioned, making money, saving money, and creating competitive advantage, how do we make sure that IT is at the forefront to actually have the time, the resources, the people available to make sure that when we're thinking about things in terms of TCO and ROI, when the business is making decisions, they don't look at IT as yet another cost center of where we have to build equipment in order to make our business run, versus they look at IT as the engine that actually helps us make money, save money, and gain a competitive advantage. And those are two very distinct areas that we live in. And unfortunately, the majority of the time, and frankly, we, the old me in the IT world, we still operate based upon some basic questions as it relates to keeping things the way they were. The number one question is how much is that going to cost? Give me a quote. How much is it going to cost? Talk all this cute stuff, Nth, HP, whoever else, give me a quote. What's my discount? How does that compare to my last discount? Who else are you giving this big discount to? Or very small discount to? Sounds familiar? Oh, yeah. That's the typical conversation. But in that conversation, how often do we look at the scenario of being able to be in a situation whereas we're actually having a discussion and we understand the opportunity at hand for the money that can be made? So let's give ourselves a theoretical business opportunity and say that there's $1 million opportunity that my business, ABC Cement Company, is going to go after. And the opportunity to realize the revenue associated with ABC Business Company is over the next 10 months. And over that next 10 months, for every month we don't execute, we're essentially losing an opportunity to realize that $1 million. Now, from an IT point of view, a question is if we can start that project day one from a successful point of view right now, we have a full 10 months to actually accelerate our business and realize that $1 million. And for every month, that decreases, 900,000, 800,000, 700,000, and down. Now, just to be honest, most of your businesses don't kick off IT projects for simply $1 million project. Would you agree? $1 million is kind of cheap nowadays. I don't know, but I mean, maybe your business is doing phenomenal on, new $1 million projects, but most of them are far beyond that. And so now if we think about that project over those 10-month scenario, and we say, okay, so we have process A in order to get infrastructure in place and everything else running so that we can actually have it up and running within, let's say, a month. And so we look at that month's time, so it'll leave us 9 months to actually realize the revenue associated with the $1 million. And then we look at it a little differently and we say, well, hold on. For a purchase, it was probably about $150,000, and it was $50,000 more than another project that we can get up in 3 months. And our response to the one in 3 months is, well, we're saving $50,000, we're saving a third of the cost, and we know how to do this work. We can put it together better than you, or we can put it together as well as you. We do this all the time. We have IT resources that can do this all the time, and we're going to get this up in 3 months. And we get to show how we, IT guys, saved money. We get to show specifically how we saved money in our own budget in terms of what we're buying now versus what we would have bought had we paid for that $150,000 that those idiots paid for over there. I'm sorry, not idiots. Those less aware, incapable people who can't figure out how to cable, put together OS's, VMs, and configure the storage, et cetera, together. And now we start looking at the actual dollars of that project. Because over that 7 months that's still remaining for that project, what you did bring in on the back end was a $50,000 savings. Awesome, love you. But that's $750,000 essentially that you're actually bringing to the company's bottom line, a combination of top line and bottom line of the benefit. On the other end, they spent $150,000 on this entire project. And as a part of that, what we don't realize is every last one of their IT resources, or the majority of their IT resources, actually contributed to other projects that are actually still up and coming in the organization. The people and resources that are associated with that are now actually getting more stuff off the plate in terms of the normal keeping the lights on scenario. And from a revenue point of view, we actually realized approximately $900,000. So if we don't increment the $50,000 that we didn't save because those guys over there did, we're actually talking about $850,000 opportunity versus $700,000 opportunity. But we spent more capital on that one to generate more revenue. And in terms of what we're doing, obviously this is a very small business of what we're talking about, but what businesses are realizing today, more and more to the IT person, they're looking at you and they're comparing you to this thing called cloud. Now, what I love about the cloud is it's self-correcting. In other words, over the last 3 to 5 years, a lot of guys said, okay, we're going to ignore IT and we're going to go run out to the cloud and we're going to do some AWS S3 and we're going to make it happen. And they ran a ton of projects on it. And then they realized, holy crap, this doesn't work much better than the stuff that we're complaining about from our IT guys. Am I right? But the realization is it became a real threat to every IT administrator's job. Now, the question is how do we work with that used-to-be threat to actually make it complement what we're doing? How do we make sure that the expectations that were set within the cloud is actually realized in terms of what our jobs are every day? Because that's not going away. So that self-correcting piece was they looked at it and said, okay, we failed. Now let's pull back, and I guess we really do need to talk to the IT guys. And so that conversation has begun, and it's been happening. And there's many things happening to actually take that conversation forward. But the important piece for you as IT leaders within your organizations is you need to figure out now, how do you actually help them accomplish what they were truly looking for with that cloud stuff that they ran off with in the first place, and continue to show the business all the value that you're going to bring in terms of what you're doing. And that brings us to what we're talking about in terms of our converged systems and what we're doing within HP. So from a traditional point of view, you have and always have been able to, for the most part, to accumulate, as I refer to it, the counterproductive cost center of traditional IT. And it's not going away. And there's plenty of people from Nth in this room here today, and there's plenty of people from HP and other companies who are actually going to have conversations with you about how do we actually allow you to take the capabilities of your storage, your server, your networking, of your application level, and the workloads associated with that to actually help you to be able to deliver on these things that we refer to as converged infrastructure, as converged cloud, software-defined data centers, et cetera. And there's an easy answer to that in that, no, I'm going to cable it myself. I'm going to plug it up myself. I'm going to build this car by myself with components from junkyards and AutoZone and whoever else and so on and so forth, and I'm going to put it all together, and I'm going to support it myself, or with pieces, parts from all these places. How about we shift that to saying, I really want to buy a brand new car, and I want some truly phenomenal service associated with it, and that vendor has already integrated all the additional features, functions, or applications or workloads, i.e. your DVD in the back of some seats for families with kids, or maybe to make sure that the GPS is completely integrated, or I love it on my car, whereas they pipe in my Pandora straight from my phone, or I can get Stitcher right there from a radio point of view. They're actually meeting my need. They're giving me the applications and the workloads and all those things that I actually depend upon on a daily basis to actually help me not focus on the underlying components. I don't really care what the engine is as much as long as that sucker gets up and go. And I failed at that because I got a company car. So it's like, this music's nice. But there's certain compromise you get as a part of that. But it's those experiences that you actually really want to focus on. And it's the same thing for your business. Someone in your business, whether it be in your legal department, are really concerned about the next request from a government entity to do an audit and to find out that you've actually missed, you've actually misquoted customers over X number of times. And the reason when you actually get down to it is because there was a law that was going to take place on this date. And however, your team had 4 months or 6 months or 9 months to get that turned around. And it took a year before the code could actually go from being written, being validated, getting all the people involved, and then being dropped into the code. And so now that insurance industry is sitting there exposed. There's a lawyer there who hates you. I promise. They don't know why they hate you. They just hate you. They don't even know that they hate you yet until that audit comes down. Even if it's not your fault that the budget kept getting cut and all these other pieces kept happening, which we all deal with, that's what they're feeling. And the reality is when we're talking about saving money, that's saving money. That's for every, I was talking with an insurance company recently, and they had a audit come up with them in the state of Connecticut, I think it was, and there were 1,500 cases where they had clients who they had improperly quoted or provided insurance of the wrong type simply because they couldn't get their IT systems updated fast enough. $18 million fine. Now, you want to argue with me about $50,000? You sure? And that's where, whether it's HP or anyone else, you want to start having that thought as IT leaders of how are we truly saving money, and more importantly, how are we driving the business? And this continues on in all industries, regardless of the one I'm giving right now in terms of insurance. This same scenario in terms of compliance, in terms of litigation, in terms of the legal entities associated with it, or just the background processes, or more importantly, again, the competitive opportunity for the business to actually move ahead of the competition. So, after all of that, Mr. Blue got my message. And he's feeling a little bit more proud of himself and happy because he's making a change in terms of how he's viewing things. And he's understanding the entire idea of improving TCO and generating ROI for his company. And as a part of that, he said, you know what, LaMills, we really want to work with you and HP and Nth. And as a part of that, our goal now is to take that customer to help them understand how are they going to actually shift their process from just being a all-day, everyday pieces, parts, components, of being able to say, okay, we're going to consolidate our environment. Well, we're going to consolidate our environment in a way that allows us to simplify the management associated with everything we're doing. How do we use our people more effectively? How do we allow our server admin and our storage admin to actually behave almost as one in many cases and actually maybe like each other? Or we can say that about the server admin and the network admin, or, you know, it depends upon the day on where the battle is. And you know, luckily in my old job way back when was, you know, I hated all of them, and I was each one. And so it's like, who's the jerk that set this up? And you look around, it's like, oh, okay. And so you get accustomed to that. But the reality is we want you to be able to get from those pieces and parts to building to a basic consolidation to now how do you automate that? And automating that can be in many phases or in many ways in terms of how you actually get an environment to be more so automated. And that will eventually take you to the cloud. And so as you're getting there, though, when we say take you to the cloud, I really appreciate the presentations from Ramon Baez and Martin Fink yesterday, because it gave you a good picture of what was going on in terms of it's not just, you know, we talk about this big panacea of the cloud still yet. And there's specific steps that we'll do. And many of us will say that we are virtualizing, we are X% virtualized right now, so we're at the cloud or ready for the cloud. Virtualization ain't the cloud. It's a phenomenal path that gets you there. It's not the cloud. So when you're starting to think about your self-service portal, meaning someone within your organization, whether it be IT or back-end, who can actually get resources from you via a request of a GUI or otherwise to actually make their operations begin to do something that they need. That's an automated or orchestrated process. Not you doing it, it's them making that self-service request. Or looking at your resources and saying, for you, okay, how do I begin to look at the need of the cost of what we have from a storage perspective or server perspective or compute in general, and I compare that with what we're going to do in-house versus the resources that we can gather via whatever our public-private cloud might be, and we make an intelligent decision or allow our systems to help us make that decision to say where our data needs to be today or where we need to pull those resources from today so that we can quickly get projects up and running, because those projects getting up and running means revenue. And that's the bottom line of what drives our overall business. And then once we realize that we can actually execute that to a point of getting to the point of revenue, then we shift that to saying, okay, now we have the business running, let's make sure that we normalize it on the right resources. But we can't confuse our operational desires of controlling each and every piece of the IT infrastructure in a way that slows down the business's opportunity to realize how they make money, save money, and gain a competitive advantage, and also expect that we're going to be valued as a part of the individuals who's driving the business. Long term, that's just not going to work. And that's what's happening every day. And so my message to you is to please figure out for yourself what that means in your business. Understand how your business truly makes money and how you truly impact that. And more often than not, when I have that discussion with IT administrators and even IT leaders sometimes, there's a big miss. We're not always clear on how our business is making money. And if we are clear on how our business is making money, we're not clear on our direct contribution to it. And in terms of the litigation and compliance and all that piece, please understand that piece as well. Whatever those factors are that's going to give your company a fine, that's going to draw them back negatively in a competitive situation or otherwise, learn those things as IT administrators. So I'm not telling you to go and learn more about fiber channels, SANs, iSCSI, fiber FCOE, FCIP, so on and so forth. Been there, done that, lived it. That's been my life. And if I'm speaking to half of you half the time, I've already talked about the technologies at hand. Your biggest challenge, in my opinion, is being very clear on how your business makes money and how you directly impact that. And the more you understand that, the more value you as an individual are going to be to your business. And the reason I bring that up is because today, I don't think there's a company in the world in terms of technology that's helping you prepare for that better than HP. And so we're going to spend a little time talking about some products now. So in terms of getting you to that point of being able to realize all the things that you can do in an IT environment, for us, one of the biggest pieces around saving the time and more so making IT administrators more efficient in what they do on a daily basis is really focused around a product that we refer to as OneView. Now, I'm going to spend some more time on the piece here that we call Sharks. And Sharks is essentially a pre-engineered system that enables you now to start thinking about your IT organization or your IT cost or your server storage networking purchases more so in a consistent fashion that can be managed by an individuals or more individuals if you choose, but in the same to allow you to actually have that environment be up and running extremely fast, that you can actually measure in days and low ends of months. And when we say measure in that time frame, I'm really talking about in terms of when are VMs deployed, or when is your big data system up and running, ready to actually collect data, to begin to analyze that data. Those are the realms. All too often we've been trained to understand that when we receive equipment is the time frame in which we measure it from. We want to start getting you focused on when is that data, or when is that system ready for data, or when is that data ready for use? Because that's now getting you closer to where your clients really are or your end users really are in terms of what's important to them. So with OneView, managing these systems, what we refer to as HP Sharks, we now have a platform that takes you from what's been traditional device management for servers that now allows you to manage the storage as well. That allows you to provision the storage, to set up, even in the case of, and I'll touch on it even more later, in the case of your virtual machines or your virtualized solutions, whether it be KVM or Hyper-V or VMware, to actually now integrate the management associated with those consistently across, giving you the capability of seeing physical and virtual environments to actually manage those consistently, whereas you can look at a VMDK, a VM, or any of the performance associated with those, and you can map that directly against what's happening at your CPU, what's happening with your memory, what's going on with the storage underneath it, what's your IOPS, and what the levels of those are. Truly bringing all of that world together so that you're actually having the power as an administrator now to truly deliver to, we can't lose sight of what we're delivering to, the business's ability to be productive, to make money, to save money, to gain competitive advantage. We always have to go back there and to be clear on that. We don't buy tools just for the fun of buying tools. We're actually buying them for a purpose that's actually going to help us draw additional value to our businesses, which will evolve into additional value for ourselves. So, OneView, we've actually now sold approximately 25,000 of these licenses within, I'm going to lie to you if I try and give you the time frame, but really fast is the answer to that. And what that does is now it provides you a tool that actually not just manages those server storage and networking. It provides these templates and profiles that does a phenomenal job of allowing you to be really fast at simple tasks that typically were repetitive tasks that extended the typical deployment or rollout of a new infrastructure or new upgrades for firmware or code release or any of the typical IT admin functions, to begin to remove the challenge of those. And if any of you in a ProLiant environment, G7, G8, ProLiant environment today, this is ready for you right now. Not only that, but if you have that ProLiant environment as well as a 3-part environment, you can actually leverage this tool to help you manage both of those environments today. And as a part of that, what we've already heard back from customers, it's been very interesting. One customer, major airline somewhere, not here, in the central time zone, has been very, very complimentary and in their feedback in terms of what the product has done for them. I think one of my good friends, Luke Vaughn, said in interviewing them to understand what the processes were and how it impacted their environment and what they thought of it, was the administrators and actually the management said the biggest benefit that he found from OneView was that it was a tool that actually made his teams like each other. And Luke said he probed further, and it's like, well, before this, it was many different management sets of different environments. But more importantly, when you actually are ready to execute on change management, there's a given set of steps of what everyone has to do within a given environment. And apparently, most of those steps have been completely eliminated. They could all be consolidated really quickly into what OneView actually allowed them to do on the servers, whereas it would take them multiple weeks to actually execute on a rollout of a large number of servers within their environment, and now they were doing this within minutes and hours. Now their team had tons of time on their hand compared to what they actually planned for, and they had to figure out other things to do. But the good piece in the very end of it was they actually built a relationship, because in the pre-planning and realizing that one tool could actually do so many of the manual steps that they did before, they actually talked to each other. It wasn't change management spreadsheet after spreadsheet. It was actually communication going on between the teams to actually help them deliver on something for the business. Now, the piece here that I want to make sure that we talk about is that when we talk about a single pane of glass, and everyone in industry says something about a single pane of glass, the beauty of OneView here is that if you're currently running VMware vCenter in your own environment, it plugs directly into it. Now, even more importantly, if you actually realize the opportunity with VMware Services Operation Management, also known as VSOM, which combines VMware vCenter management as well as the vCops, what you get from that is now a completely integrated solution that now brings all of the power of OneView on the physical servers to actually be communicated directly into the VMware realm for all of the virtualized environments. So you can truly see both consistently Whether it be measuring IOPS that's happening from a server storage perspective, whether it be looking at throughput, whether you're saying I want to look at the health management of my system overall, i.e., how well is my the VMDKs associated with these servers performing versus the actual back end of how much utilization am I seeing on the CPUs and the memory and otherwise associated with it. Wow. The CPUs and all of the system resources on the server are far below or are extremely underutilized, but I can see that the application is actually getting everything it needs and above. What if we actually shifted this a little bit and actually saved more money, or we figured out that we can actually bring more VMs into this environment? So instead of picking up another set of servers to actually drive our next project or otherwise, we realize that we have, from a capacity point of view, tons of resources still ready to go in our server environment. Maybe we only need to add a little bit more of something else, or I should say memory or another drive or whatever the case, to actually get all the VMs that we need in this environment to actually execute on the overall project. It gives you insight to now start thinking about how do you truly save money, how do you get up and running much faster than you normally would, and how do you help the business realize a revenue opportunity much faster than they would otherwise, thus truly putting you ahead from a competitive point of view. So for the sharks that I mentioned, there's a portfolio of sharks that we actually released in December. We started off with two basic ones. There was our virtualization, which were all based upon VMware, and then there's our Citrix, which is our 100, CS100, which is based 100, again, on Citrix, based upon our Moonshot platform to actually deliver for client virtualization, what we call hosted desktops. Following that now, we've now come forward, and you've heard a little bit about Vertica today, and I really love what Portman had to say in terms of log everything. Someone's going to come around with a great idea in terms of how you can make money from that. And note that the entire purpose of that was how do you make money? How do you generate revenue for the next opportunity within the business? But if you don't have that data available, you are not capable of doing that. And even more miraculously was how Vertica took all of that data and actually allowed it to be analyzed in an extremely quick fashion based upon the consumption of model that was already there in the past. In addition to that, we also have the Microsoft APS. And so we now have a solution that's based 100% around what you have traditionally heard of in terms of Microsoft SQL, but we've now taken that environment and created a full converged system, pre-engineered system specifically to actually drive the analytics associated with that platform for those customers who are already using a SQL environment, who wants high-end data analytics and who want to leverage that in a thorough fashion. We now have a system specifically for that. And on top of that, we have multiple SAP HANA systems. And for the SAP HANA systems, we're clearly now, from a performance point of view, the world leader in terms of the analytics associated with that, how our engine actually delivers on that. And we have what's referred to as the CS500 and the CS900 scale up and scale out components, which goes up to huge capacity points to actually address that. So for the virtualization piece, what we've done with those is there's a CS300 with a couple models, and there's a CS700 and 700X couple models. And essentially what we're providing there, the differentiation that we want to make sure that everyone understands from us versus anyone else in the industry, what we do. We're not just building up or shipping out pieces and saying, please buy these, and we'll figure it out, and it's going to be the same as you've always done it, or it's the same as our competition. We pre-engineer these. When we say pre-engineer, what we mean by that is in our factory, we actually build these units based upon information we received based upon the customer's environment, whether it be IP addresses, VMs, the environments associated with those VMs, host names, and otherwise. We build them in factory. We run them through all of the testing that's required for that. And actually, the testing is a big piece. How many individuals have ever heard of DOA, or I should say, dead on arrival? Have you ever experienced it, or you just heard of it? Weren't you happy with us when that happened? Or you went and hugged someone from Nth, right? You're like, oh, it's okay that, you know, you're forgiving, right? Probably not. The biggest component of dealing with DOAs is called more testing. It's pretty basic. You give most things more than an hour's worth of testing in almost any scenario, the majority of the faults are going to be realized after manufacture. These units go through over 180 tests before they ever leave our factory. Now, for the majority of our competition, it's actually boxes shipped to either an integrator or to the customer site, and it's plugged up on site or at the integrator, and then it's rolled over to you. And where do we find out about the issue being? Yeah. So as much as anything, one piece that none of our marketing collateral had was that. And so that's the piece that was important to me, because I remember getting DOAs all the time. And all of these pathetic excuses, I mean wonderful excuses from the partner and the manufacturer around, oh, it's going to take care of it. But that doesn't change the fact of you now have all of your people and resources ready to go to address this matter. And, and I felt sorry for the sales team and everyone else, because they're like, but I didn't know, and, please be nice to me. And it's like, I really don't want to hear it right now. But that's one of the big pieces. The other piece is that we're HP, meaning we're HP. So from a services point of view or support point of view, you're going to get a consistent experience between us and, let's say, VCE. You pick up the phone. They're going to support it end-to-end, essentially, for the VMware component, the Cisco component, the EMC component, and the virtualization. Can't even say anything about it. They're going to do essentially the same thing. What they're not going to do is they're not going to get any of the data associated with your phone home capabilities, because they can't. They're not the manufacturer. And what that means is, from a proactive stance, the best support I've always found is the support that I didn't need. Because when I pick up the phone, I'm not happy. Something bad has happened. If I can figure out, or if you can help me figure out a way to prevent that issue from happening in the first place, you've saved me a ton of money, you've saved me a ton of time, and frankly, you've saved me a lot of respect within my IT organization. So how about all of the issues associated with our converged systems are actually always piped directly back to HP, to what we refer to as our center of excellence, to actually take on every call that's actually coming in. So for your server, your storage, and your networking, we actually get all of the errors, all of the issues that are actually coming back. And so even if it's not putting you down yet, it's a threat to your environment. So we proactively, on a quarterly basis, actually address that by giving you information that you need to actually make the necessary changes. VCE can't do that. Not because they're a bad company or they made bad choices. It's simply they're a different company from the companies who actually get the data. So on to that. Now, for enterprise mobility, we actually now have a solution here that I referred to around the CS100 that essentially takes and looks at your environment of hosted desktops for what we refer to typically as a task worker. But essentially, you can get 180 clients or end users, thin clients, that's actually working right here within a 5U scenario. It's actually smaller than 5U. I just say 5 because I round big. And so with that, within a 5U scenario, you actually have 180 users that's actually dedicated right there, leveraging our Moonshot technology. Now, as a part of that, depending upon what your environment is, this is based 100% on Citrix environment, and you're going to have various other scenarios that you'll use. Obviously, some of you may use VMware, VMview, I should say, as a part of that scenario. This may not be the right fit, but if you have a greenfield environment or an environment that you're already using Citrix, you have a set of employees that you would like to use for what we refer to as a task worker environment, phenomenal scenario. And it's 100% handling. Each of those clients will actually have their very own processor to actually manage their operations. So in other words, you don't have the interruption of all of the other users in the environment actually causing issues or from concurrency in dealing with those situations. The other piece here is actually within our Converged System 700. We've now provided a solution that actually allows you within your overall environment to do your normal operations and to also host your VDI environment as a part of that. And with that, you now have a solution, again, based upon Citrix, to leverage the Zen desktop to actually drive forth a balance of how much of your environment you're going to use from a VDI point of view, as well as what you're going to do for the remainder of your environment for all of your other operations, whatever that may be. That's another solution that's available to you. For SAP HANA, I already mentioned the 500 system, which is a phenomenal system in terms of performance, as well as giving you excellent capacity points to actually deal with all of the challenges associated with your typical SAP environment. And if you're using SAP today, do understand that SAP is driving everything to HANA. Everything. And so this is a phenomenal opportunity for you to figure out how do you actually leverage that environment to actually benefit the overall response time that businesses have to generate information extremely quickly, to come up with new opportunities of how do you use much of the stale data, for lack of better words, that's been sitting there for a long time that no one's used, to figure out how do we actually leverage that to actually drive new opportunities for our business to be improved, to actually gain additional areas of revenue or otherwise. And then along with the 500 is the 900. And the 900 is a really big system that actually not just does all of those pieces, but it brings together technologies, all HP again, to actually drive all of these scenarios end to end. Microsoft Analytics that I referred to, imagine all of your SQL environment in terms of what you have and the capabilities of that in terms of how you can begin using these smaller instances to be pulled together to have all of that data analyzed across your entire environment. This is what this provides at an extremely effective cost point, while at the same time allowing your administrators not to have to learn many new tools, many new processes, or many new applications that they weren't accustomed to in the first place. So that's the Microsoft Analytics piece. And when you look at the overall portfolio, here's where we're taking you. We believe that we can, or not believe, but we know as of now we've brought our customers to a point whereas you can actually take a fully consolidated environment. You can build the necessary analytics as a part of that, virtualization tools as a part of that, and then begin to take that entire environment to a scenario whereas you can leverage that regardless of whether you choose to do it in-house, whether you do it on the cloud, or whether you do a combination of both. And as a part of that, to now, through OneView, to give you the capabilities of leveraging application control, user control, and all the tools to make sure that you have the flexibility and the capability of being seen within your company as a valued resource, of making sure that you are helping the company drive their ability to make money, save money, and gain competitive advantage. Thank you.